So let's talk about why a narcissist is always watching you and what it is that they're doing when they're staring at you. I found this to be really, really bizarre. So, I mean, of course, I've dealt with tons of narcissists in my law practice, either as clients or as opposing clients, opposing counsel. But one of the things that I noticed with the two narcissists that I had to deal with in my life is that they were always watching me. They were staring at me, either in person, because one of the narcissists that I had to deal with was a family member. And, so I noticed that this person was always kind of watching me and sort of staring at me. And, or the other person who was in my life, unfortunately, as a narcissist, they were always watching what I was doing, either online or social media or whatever it was. And I just found it really, really bizarre. And I used to talk about it with my husband all the time, who, of course, my husband didn't know narcissists or understand narcissism or had never studied it. So, he was like, oh, they probably just like you, maybe they admire you or something like that. I mean, but I just remember thinking it was really kind of creepy. Like, why are these people watching me? Because it wasn't normal, like, oh, I happen to notice what this person is wearing or something. It was like watching me. And as I started to study narcissism and really learn about the personality, because I was trying to learn so that I could be a better lawyer and learn how to negotiate better and become more of a master in dealing with narcissists in the negotiating realm, I was also learning about narcissists in general. And one of the reasons that I found that they're constantly watching you and they're constantly staring at you is because they are trying to take you in. They need that endless amount of supply. So they're studying you, they're watching you to see what it is that you're doing because they want to emulate you. They want to be you. They want to be like you. You become a narcissist target because you have so much value. And that's like the really crazy thing, because they start devaluing you right away after the love bomb phase. And if you want to know more about narcissistic devaluing, check out my video on narcissistic devaluing. But especially covert narcissists, they really are kind of studying you, but in a covert way. And I have a couple of videos on covert narcissists, which is covert narcissists in relationships and the covert passive aggressive narcissist. And the two narcissists that I had to deal with were both covert narcissists, and the covert narcissists are the ones that are going to be more likely to be kind of staring at you and watching you and studying you because they want to take you in. They want to actually I felt like the one narcissist in my life was almost trying to step into my shoes and push me aside or disappear me. And it was the strangest thing. It's like, it wasn't just admiration. It was this odd sort of pod thing. Like, I'm going to take over everything that you've done and take credit for it. And I'm attaching myself to you but I'm doing this because I want to just sort of become you. And rather than trying to do these things all on their own, because narcissists don't feel like they have the ability to become things on their own. They don't have any sense of self. They have no sense of self-worth. So what they do is they attach themselves to people who have the qualities that they want. That's the type of narcissistic supply. So they're watching you because they're kind of obsessed with you in a lot of ways. So that's one of the reasons that they are always watching you. Another reason that they're always watching you is to actually attract you, because they want you to be part of their world. They want you to like them, at least initially. They want you to be under their web of control. They need you to become that narcissistic supply for them. Another reason that they're always watching you is because they are hoovering you. So maybe it's you're into the discard phase, or and now you've discarded them, or even if they've discarded you, but they still, even if they're discarding you, want you to continue to be a source of supply for them. They'll keep you. I heard somebody say it's almost like they keep people on shelves that, you know, could potentially be narcissistic supply down the road, and they just, it's almost like they're saving you like in jars or something, and they can pull it back out if they want to, if they need to. So they'll come back and hoover at you again to try to get you to become part of that narcissistic supply again. So that's one of the reasons why they stare or they watch you also. And another reason that they do it is because they want to intimidate you. So sometimes I've seen this actually, like in depositions and things like that, where somebody's trying to divorce a narcissist, and they'll actually stare at that person who's being deposed because they want to intimidate that person, or they want to be like, you know, you better be careful about what you're going to say or what you're about to do, because, you know, I'm watching you, kind of a thing. And it can be kind of, you know, scary or intimidating, especially if you're dealing with a malignant narcissist. And if you've seen a narcissist, you know, watching you and you've experienced it, give me a, I've experienced this in the comments. Just comment below, I've experienced this. And let me know what your experience has been with them watching you like this. I mean, it's super creepy. It's really weird. You know, if you don't know anything about narcissists, if you haven't been studying this or watching videos like mine and really understanding the personality of a narcissist, you might think, what the heck are you doing? Why are you staring at me? But there's a number of reasons why they do that. So, and the last reason why a narcissist might happen to stare at you is because they want your attention. So they just are like watching you because they want you to watch them back. They want you to stare back at them. They want to get your attention. So, you know, everything is wrapped up in getting some sort of supply for a narcissist, and they get supply from getting your attention. They get supply from hoovering you and trying to get you back and get you back into their web of control. They get supply from intimidating you. And they get supply from watching you and trying to become you and devaluing you so that, you know, they can get as much supply from you as they possibly can and control you. So, of course, that's why they stare at you. That's why they watch you. It is really bizarre, and I remember feeling extremely uncomfortable and not liking it at all, and knowing that there was something wrong with it, but not knowing why. So I'm going to be giving you five compelling reasons that covert narcissists are always watching you. And it's really crucial to understand what a covert narcissist is and how it differs from the more well-known overt narcissists. Covert narcissists, unlike their overt counterparts, aren't as openly self-centered and self-aggrandizing as the covert narcissist. Instead, they display a pattern of modesty. They almost play the victim, you know, instead of like that overt narcissist that goes in and demands the best table in the restaurant, or, you know, sort of holds court wherever they go. They're like hypersensitive and almost like defensive, and they operate under the radar. They kind of pretend like they don't want attention to themselves. And it makes their behavior much more difficult to recognize. Reason number one that they're sort of always watching you is that they're always on the hunt for information. They're constantly watching you because they're meticulously trying to glean information about your behavior. They're watching your reactions. They're watching your habits. Why are they doing that? They want to be able to weaponize this behavior against you eventually. Remember, with a narcissist, you're either for them or you're against them. And if you're against them, you're going to be public enemy number one, especially in a negotiation. And so they're constantly watching to see, are you for me or are you against me? They want to see, what do you like? What do you don't like? Are you for me or are you against me? So let's say, you like classic novels. And in that case, they might want to steer this conversation or manipulate this conversation toward, are you going to be for me or are you going to be against me? Are you my perfect mate or are you not my perfect mate? Because if you don't like exactly what I like, then maybe, you're not perfect for me. That's how they are, like, even if you don't align exactly with me, then you're not going to be for me anymore, because that's how they are. They're constantly looking to see that. And if you're out in public and you say, well, I don't necessarily like that anymore, they use that as like a personal affront. They actually see that as you're now belittling them in some way. They see this as a public confrontation, and they use this as, you did this to me in a group setting, and they want to use this and they retaliate against you in some way, and they'll watch you. They'll be watching to see, how did you behave against them in this way? They're constantly watching you, constantly observing. How are you behaving with me? Are you for me? Are you against me? So they're constantly watching you because they're going to use this information. They're going to weaponize this information against you. The next reason they're constantly watching you is for control. They're yearning for control. And by observing you, they can identify vulnerabilities, insecurities, weaknesses, which they will exploit and use against you to maintain and establish control. And they start with this early on during the love bombing phase, by the way. And it manifests even in a professional relationship where they deliberately put you in uncomfortable situations to assert their dominance. And we're talking about covert narcissists here. And I'm not talking about dominance is a dominant overt narcissist. We're talking about covert narcissists. So let's say a partner is aware of their partner's anxiety around social gatherings. So they might insist that their partner attend these events frequently, even though their partner has anxiety around attending social gatherings. So they'll say, we have to go, we must go, to perpetually throw their partner off balance. And they do this so that their partner becomes dependent upon them for emotional support. So they purposely do that to make them even more anxious. That's what the kind of thing that they'll do. It's very stealth. It's very manipulative. So that's number two. Number three is what I call like a pretend connection. The third reason that they will be watching you. It's to sort of create a pretend connection with you. So they'll watch you to see what it is that you're into so that they can say, oh, I also love whatever it is that you're into, so that they can kind of suddenly adopt
the same thing that you're into and have this pretend shared connection with you. And, it isn't a true, genuine interest. It's a tactical move to create an illusion of compatibility. And obviously, it ends up wearing off after a while. This is more like a love bombing move that they have, right? It is so fake. And obviously, they're fakers. And if you agree with me, put fakers in the comments. And if you've seen any of these things so far, just put something in the comments to let me know what you've seen so far. I have a video on love bombing, and I highly recommend that you check out my video on love bombing as well. And if you're trying to disarm narcissists, I have a free phrases for disarming narcissists, which you can get at disarmthenarc.com. That will help you as well. So just disarmthenarc.com and get my free phrases for disarming narcissists as well. The next one is mimicking social cues. That's the reason number 4. They struggle with empathy, and they struggle with, what to do for empathy. So they watch real people know what to do, and so that they know how to behave, they know how to act. They watch you closely, studying how you express sympathy or joy, and then mirror these behaviors so that they know how to fit in. Think of it this way, like suppose a covert narcissist observes their friend consoling someone who's upset. They might store this interaction sort of like in their behavioral bank, like replicating it in the future to appear empathetic and caring, even though these emotions may not genuinely resonate with them. Sort of like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do, right? Okay, so that's reason number 4. And by the way, if you need support, you need additional support, and you need therapy, I have a sponsor on this channel, which is BetterHelp. And don't sit there alone. Don't sit there isolated. Get the help and support that you need. Just go to betterhelp.com/Rebecca Zung and get the therapy and help that you need. We receive commissions on that. It doesn't cost you any extra. It's just we want you to have access to help and support that you can trust. And also, I have a free private Facebook group that you can get the help and support that you need in as well. And that's Narcissist Negotiators with Rebecca Zung. Please get help and support that you can trust and that you need. Because, I know when you're dealing with narcissists, it's extremely, extremely painful, helpless. You feel helpless, you feel powerless. All right. The last reason is reason number 5, and that's the hunt for praise and validation. Reason number 5 is their ceaseless hunt for praise and validation. Covert narcissists, they want, that endless black hole. They want to constantly looking for what will impress you or what pleases you. So they align their actions accordingly, and they stage scenarios to exhibit qualities and achieve their desired admiration accordingly. So they're looking to see, okay, are they looking at me? Are they watching me? And so they look to see, are you seeing what I'm doing, right? So am I caught in the act, doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Not doing something good for somebody because that's the right thing to do, but because am I being watched doing the right thing? So that I can get praised. Like they're the first person who shows up at the hospital because, the right people might be watching or whatever. There you have it. The fascinating yet strange, unnerving 5 reasons that covert narcissists are always watching you. And it's crucial to understand that these behaviors, we can watch them, we can learn from them, and become stronger as a result. Use them as lessons. Knowledge is power. We can use it as a shield, and we can use it as, in a way, as a sword, right? And the more we comprehend this, the better and stronger that we can be. Remember, they're not going to change, but you can certainly change. And you are capable, and you are resilient, you are strong, and you can keep moving forward. You can keep learning, and every day you can become a better version of yourself.
Fed up with narcissists walking all over you? Sick of everyone believing their lies while you're paying through the nose in attorney's fees? What if you could hold all the cards for a change? Hey, I'm Rebecca Zung. I'm a top 1% trial attorney, a USA Today bestselling author, and I've spent my entire career helping people slay narcissists in negotiations, most recently through my proven slay method. What if your suffering could become your superpower? Imagine turning all that pain into power, not just for you, but for others too. This is your chance to take back control. You can finally win. Become a high conflict negotiation certified coach. Help others while transforming your own life and do good for the world. This is your chance. Go to RebeccaZung.com/apply and I'll show you how to turn the tables for good starting today.
Let's talk about how the narcissist is finally like watching what you're doing instead of like you dealing with them, right? Okay, so what happens is they end up watching you. And why are they watching you? Well, let's talk about that. So what happens is there is this cycle that they go through. First of all, they are checking you out to see if you are going to be a good source of supply. So they love bomb you. So they go through these various phases of a relationship. It's love bombing, and then they devalue, and then they discard, and then they kind of hoover sometimes. But it's not always linear, right? So they love bomb, and then it's devalue, and then going back to love bomb sometimes, and then to discard. And it's kind of this whole back and forth constantly, and it's not always linear. But they're constantly testing you and conditioning you to see if you are going to be sticking around. They want to see if you are going to be a good form of supply. So they find this target. They want to be the center of attention. They need to be the center of attention. They need this constant adulation. They need you to be paying attention to them at all times. They want to make sure that you are going to be paying attention to them. And then they start devaluing you. And that's part of the conditioning, by the way, because they want to see how you're going to behave when they're devaluing you. So they start ghosting you, they start barbing you, they start saying things, and they want to see, are you going to stick around? Are they going to be able to get away with that? What are you going to do when they do that? And how do you behave? Are you going to go after them, beg for them? They want to know, do they have control over you? Do you beg for their approval? They want to know, are you going to beg for their approval? They want that. They want to start this cycle. And then it starts this cycle of abuse. And then you, by the way, you start needing that hit of dopamine, because then when you get that approval from them, you get that hit of dopamine in your brain. And now you actually start becoming addicted to needing their approval. And that's how that trauma brain starts. That's how you start becoming addicted to needing them. And that's why it becomes so difficult to separate yourself from them. It's actually almost like a cult in some ways. And then they start watching you at all times. Not necessarily, and it's so confusing because you confuse that with love. It's not necessarily love. It's you are their possession. To them, it's you belong to them. It's an extension of them. You are their source of supply. And I have a whole lot more of this on my video called Why is Narcissist Always Watching You? And I would definitely check that out, by the way. But they're always watching you. They're always monitoring your behavior and your actions. And it's super weird. And I remember when I was targeted by a couple of different covert narcissists, I remember they were constantly watching me and copying my behavior.
mimicking my behavior, mirroring my behavior. And it was super weird, super stockish, very, very eerie and very unsettling, to say the least. And I remember feeling really kind of grossed out by it. But that's, you know, something that they do because they don't have a sense of self. So they're constantly watching as well. And you're never going to really know how they see you, by the way, because the view they hold of you is distorted by their own needs and their own desires. I mean, so they only want to be seen in their light, in their needs, and their desires. Okay. So from their perspective, you are a victim. So how do they become your spectator? Well, by you moving on. You start to move on. You start to become stronger. You start to place your boundaries. You start to hold your ground. You start to say, this is not going to be how it's going to go anymore. You start to negotiate with them from a place of strategy. You start to create leverage. You start to decide that this is not how it's going to go anymore. And you start to say, I'm going to walk away from this. And that's what I teach you in my SLAY strategy. That's how my entire methodology is. Obviously, this isn't something that happens overnight. Obviously, this is something that's a little bit of a long game, and you have to plan for this.
If you are dealing with a narcissist, you're dealing with gaslighting, because they all do it, all different forms of narcissist, no matter what kind you're dealing with, whether it's the malignant form, the grandiose form, or the covert form, they all engage in gaslighting, and especially the covert form. And if you're dealing with a covert narcissist, or you suspect that you may be, you're definitely going to want to check out my videos on covert narcissism in relationships and the covert passive aggressive narcissist. And I will drop a link to those videos below. So I'm going to give you a definition of gaslighting, and then I'm going to give you some examples of what it looks like in regular relationships in general, and then also what it looks like when you are either divorcing a narcissist, breaking up with a narcissist, or dissolving any kind of a relationship with a narcissist, even if it's a business partnership or a friendship, something like that, okay? Okay, so what gaslighting is, it's a form of psychological manipulation and abuse that is deliberately designed to try to make you think that you're crazy. And more importantly, from the narcissist or sociopath's perspective, it is designed for them to self-preserve and maintain control over you or whoever their victim is. The term gaslighting actually came from a play and then a movie from the 1940s where the husband, and it was actually called Gaslight, I believe, and the husband was intentionally trying to make the wife think that she was crazy. So what he would do is he would mess with the gaslights in the house. He would blow them out or turn them down or something like that. And she would say, wasn't that just lit? And he would say, no, wasn't lit. So obviously, you know, you must be crazy. And I think she did eventually even end up going crazy. And so that is the term that we now use for people who inflict psychological abuse on another person in order to try to gain control over them and make them think that they're crazy. And as I said, it's especially a favorite tactic of covert narcissists because it's a really under the radar type of abuse. It's not overt abuse. It's not physical abuse. It's not it's not outwardly calling someone a horrible name. It's not calling them stupid. It's much more subtle. It's much more lethal in a lot of ways, much more toxic, very, very stealth and insidious. And because it's so stealth, because it's so toxic, because it's so insidious, it can actually cause the victim to start feeling anxiety, depression, You do start feeling like you're going insane. It invokes feelings of self-esteem problems, worthlessness. It's a really, you really feel traumatized. It literally sucks the life out of you. I mean, you've heard narcissists be referred to as energy vampires. They literally drain the life out of you. And, it can cause forms of PTSD. It is a trauma, and it can be very difficult to get over if you've been subjected to it for years at a time. So one form of gaslighting is lying, and how it will look is they'll lie. If you ask them if they did something, they'll lie and say that they did it. And then when you catch them saying that they didn't, or finding out that they didn't do what they said they were going to do, then they manipulate it in some way so that you confuse the conversation, or so that it didn't happen the way you thought it was, or something like that. So they just out and out lie about it. And then when you catch them in the lie, they go to manipulate the truth about it. So how that might look in a divorce is that they said that they were going to deposit money in a certain bank account. So you go and you keep checking the bank account because they said they took care of it, and you will keep not seeing the money in the bank account. And so days go by and you say, you said that you put the money in the bank account, it's not there. Well, then they come back and they'll say, oh, I never said that I was going to put the money in the bank account. What I said was that I was going to pay the bills. And you say, no, I have this email that says, I asked you if you put the money in the bank account and you said you took care of it. And then they say, well, what I meant was that I would take care of the bills, that I'll just pay them directly. And so you misunderstood what I was going to say. And then, of course, they don't even pay the bills directly. So, it's this game that goes on with you where you're just, on constant pins and needles, wondering what's going on. And it's their way of maintaining control over you, and also making you think that you're crazy. So another form of this charming thing is manipulation. And so how this looks is that you think that you had a conversation about something, and how it, how maybe it's about scheduling, or maybe you decided that you weren't going to do something on a particular weekend, or maybe you decided that you were going to do something together, and suddenly that's changed, and they've manipulated how that was going to look as well. So how that might look in a divorce or a breakup situation is that they'll come to you and they'll say, here are 3 choices for how we can settle and resolve our differences and our issues. And you say, okay, I pick number 2. And then they come back and you think, finally, I'm just going to give them what they want. I can live with number 2. And you go through all of the machinations of figuring out if this is the right one. And okay, I guess I can live with that. And all right, I'll pick number 2. Thinking this is finally going to be over. And then you go back and you pick number 2. And then they come back and they say, well, we can't do number 2 anymore, because number 2 only was on the table if you were going to do X, Y, and Z. And they make something up that, of course, never was part of the conversation. And now suddenly the whole deal has blown up because it was an illusory promise to begin with. It was a deal that was never going to be had, because the truth is, they don't want to settle the case. They want to make your life as miserable as possible. I mean, they want to settle, they want to get as much as they possibly can. They do want to win, but they want to win in a way that is a manipulation win. It's not like a reasonable person conversation. Okay, and then the third thing is deflecting or blame shifting. And how this looks is that if you call them out on their behavior and you say, aha, like this is definitely something that you didn't do. You said you were going to send this email on this day and you didn't do it. Well, then they deflect, they blame shift, or let's say you call them out on something in the middle of a conversation, you were irresponsible. Well, they'll turn around and they'll say, I don't like your tone. I don't like the way you said that. or you're always irresponsible because blah, blah, blah. So they deflect and blame shift. So in a divorce, it might look like this. You guys have an agreement to use a co-parenting app for all of your communications for the child, okay? So, and then out of the blue, you get a message in the co-parenting app that says, thank you so much for agreeing to change weekends with me and give me, you know, Johnny on your parenting time next weekend. And you immediately write back and you say, as you know, we were supposed to use our co-parenting app for all conversations around changing the schedule. And you didn't ask me about this, and this conversation never took place. And then the next thing you're going to hear is, oh, really? Are you're so petty that we have to use an app? Really? I mean, I guess if you're just that petty and you're that immature that you can't just have a regular conversation, that we have to use the app for everything, and suddenly it becomes your fault. If you are so ready to be done with these games, give me an I'm ready in the comments. Okay, so here are a couple of things that you can do about gaslighting. Remember, you're not going to stop them from gaslighting, but what you can do is shut them down in some way so that it doesn't affect you. So my suggestions are ways that you can protect yourself from what they're going to continue to do. Think of the narcissist as the wild animal. They will never be caged. They will never be tamed. Well, they can be caged, but that's a whole other conversation. That's more around strategy and leverage, and that's another whole conversation, but they will never be tamed. And so you just have to assume that they're going to be whoever they are. So the first thing that you can do is realize what's happening. You know, once you start to take a step back and you can start observing them as if they are a 2-year-old having a tantrum on the floor, and say, oh, well, there they go again, being their narky selves, you know, that's the first step in not bringing this into yourself and starting to get over those feelings of anxiety and all of that, when you can really start seeing them for who they are. So that's number one, is just realize what's happening and take a step back. Okay, so number two is not to take anything personally that they do. So number one, you just start taking a step back and you're just observing them. Number two is realizing that they are just all about self-preservation. When you realize that everything a narcissist does is just really about them and has nothing to do with you, because they can't see past themselves, that nothing is about you. So you can't ever take anything they do personally. It's always about themselves. They don't have the ability to have any empathy. They lack total empathy for anyone except themselves. So remember, they have no internal sense of value. They're trying to grab everything they can from the external. So this whole thing of gaslighting you is self-preservation and trying to control you and control their environment. So, so number two is don't take it personally. Okay, and number three is to connect with other people who have been targets or victims, survivors and thrivers of narcissistic abuse. Because these are your people. These are the people who understand where you've been and where you're going and what you need to do to heal yourself. I have a private Facebook group. It's totally free. It's called Narcissist Negotiators with Rebecca Zung, and I will drop a link to that below. If you want to connect with other people who are dealing with the same things that you are, go ahead and ask to join that Facebook group. And there you'll be able to connect with other people who can support you online. Number four is to create hard and fast boundaries. Just decide, like, this is how much communication I'm going to have with this person, or this is what the communication is going to look like. And just, you know, when you recognize the signs of what they're doing and that they're lying, just don't allow them to get away with it. Don't allow that to continue to happen. You know, you've noticed it, you've decided not to take it personally. So now you're just going to just keep it over here away from you. Number 5 is seek professional assistance. If you can't afford a therapist or you don't have insurance, maybe there's a clergy member or somebody that you can talk to, or some kind of support group, in your community. If you want to talk to somebody who has more training around helping people through trauma and dealing with how to get over the abuse and all of the feelings of anxiety that you probably have as a result of dealing with this for years. And finally, the last one, number 6, is if you can, I always advocate to start planning your exit from the relationship. If you can. I obviously understand if you have children together, or there's a financial constraint, or there's other reasons why you feel like it's best for you to stay in the relationship right now, then that's what you need to do. But, eventually, I would suggest that you try to shut down everything with that narcissist. There's never a good way to try to have a relationship or be in relationship with the narcissist. They just aren't capable of doing it.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's be real. Therapy can feel like a really big investment, but your mental health is just as important as your physical health. Traditional in-person therapy can cost $100 to $250 per session, but with BetterHelp, you can save up to 50% per session on average. You pay a flat weekly fee, which means more peace of mind for less. Therapy should feel accessible, not like a luxury. BetterHelp gives you that, all from the comfort from your home. And with over 30,000 therapists to choose from and 5 million people served globally, this is the world's largest online therapy platform, and you can switch therapists at any time. Your well-being is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/negotiate today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/negotiate.
So let's talk about the tactics that narcissists use to manipulate and punish their victims. So the first thing that they do to even be able to be put in a position of being able to manipulate and punish their victims is they love bomb. And I talk a lot more about love bombing in my video on love bombing, so check that out if you want. But really what it is they are extremely charismatic. One of the hallmarks of narcissists is they are very likable to the outside world. They're like the greatest salesmen on earth in a lot of ways. They are extremely intelligent. They are masters at reading people. So right from the beginning, they are reading you to see how they can best kind of worm their way into your lives and put themselves in a position to be able to do things like this. Because it's not like they come along being abusive. You would never have gotten into that relationship with them if they just came on that way. They come off seeming perfect for you. And even when you're not in a romantic relationship with these people, maybe it's just a business relationship, they still come off as if they were like a gift from heaven. Like you can't even believe how wonderful this person is. You know, if it's in business, they are the perfect business partner for you. They have all the right contacts. They can make all the right introductions. They can put you in incredible places, and you will elevate your career by being with them. So that's that. And then, you know, if it's a romantic relationship, obviously they're perfect for you in every way. They have the perfect job. They take care of you. They say how amazing you are. If you're a guy, you're the most handsome thing they've ever seen, a total Adonis. If you are a woman, then you're the most beautiful woman they've ever seen. They can't believe how perfect you are for them. They've never had another soulmate like this. They've never even been in love before until you came along. I mean, whatever they need to say in order to suck you in to be. And so that's really one of the first ways that they manipulate and punish to start being even in a position to manipulate and punish their victims is that love bomb stage. The next thing that you'll notice, and these are in no particular order at all, but one of the ways that they manipulate and punish their victims is by ghosting them. So now all of a sudden you can't get in touch with them. You know, they've been texting you for days on end, 20,000 times a day. And now when you want to call them out on something, or you want them for something, or you need them for something, now all of a sudden they can't be found. They aren't there. And then when you question them on it, it was, oh, I was busy. How dare you? I'm working, or something like that. Or if you're calling them out on something that, you know, maybe that, you know, you are questioning them on, maybe they're speaking to somebody else that they shouldn't be, they've been particularly flirty or something like that, then, you know, they'll start ghosting you. Like, they'll just totally ignore you. And that's one of the ways that they punish their victims. And if you want to know more about ghosting, check out my 101 series, my Narcissism 101 series. I have tons of videos in there about all the different terminology that you need to know, and ghosting is one of those videos, so we'll make sure that we drop a link to that below as well. Another thing that they will try to do is they will start trying to make you jealous. And, you know, sometimes this is called triangulation. Sometimes they just are lining up flying monkeys to be against you, but they're talking to other people. They're trying to make it seem like they have a better relationship with other people, or these other people are better than you in some way. They're starting to put you down. They're starting this like little subtle devaluing starts. And if you want to know more about devaluing, check out my video on devaluing. But this is where the subtle devaluing starts, where you start to go, gosh, you know, that didn't feel right, that didn't seem right. And a lot of times, especially with covert narcissists, and there's a whole bunch more on this in my video on the covert passive-aggressive narcissists, who are my personal ones that I hate the most, because I've had to deal with them in my own life and fell prey to a couple of them in my own life, which I never will again because I know so much about narcissism now. But you know, one of the things that they do is like these little subtle drip, drip, drip things that are so small that you like, do I even say anything about this? Or maybe I'm making too much of it. Maybe I'm just going crazy. You know, it's oftentimes death by 1,000 cuts, where you just think, well, that didn't seem right. Or maybe they are just, you know, talking to this person because they have a work relationship with them, or because they're trying to build a better relationship with our neighbors or our friends. And maybe I am making too much of it. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Or maybe I'm being overly jealous, or, you know, you start questioning yourself as to whether or not you're kind of blowing it out of proportion, because that's what they'll try to make it seem like you're doing, is blowing it out of proportion. And the next thing that they do to manipulate and punish their victims is gaslighting. And I have a whole video on gaslighting. And this is something that all narcissists do. And they do it, by the way, not just to you, but they kind of gaslight everybody. And that is, it's a huge way that they get along in the world. And that is like, even though you're looking at evidence and you see facts of something, they basically, and you know what conversation you had, they make it seem like that's not what you're seeing, that's not what you're looking at, that's not what you heard, that's not how it went down, you know, you're remembering it wrong, you are taking something out of context, you are, you know, even if you have an email or something. I mean, this is one of the things that happened in my relationship with one of the narcissists I was dealing with. It was, you know, even though I had an email that said, this is what the conversation was, and mine was in a business setting. The person came back and was like, oh, we talked about this and you agreed to blah, blah, blah. And even though the email didn't even say that, but they just will say, well, but that's a conversation that we had, or whatever, you agreed to that. And of course it's something you would never agree to, but you start to slowly lose your mind. And that's what happens with gaslighting. You just are starting to slowly lose your mind. And if this is exactly what you have seen in your relationship with the narcissist, I want to see an exactly in the comments. Just give me the word exactly in the comments. And the next thing that they do is they go straight from degrading and insulting you to love bombing you again. And sometimes this is called hoovering. And it's especially, you see this like during the birth of the smear campaign, during the discard phase, whether you're discarding or they're discarding. And sometimes they start this long before the actual discard happens, because they're either expecting you to discard them eventually, or they're expecting to discard you eventually. But they go from this heinous beast of a string of insults and the gaslighting and the intimidation tactics and all of these manipulation tactics that, I talked about, the passive aggressiveness, on and on and on, to, oh, but, we've always been able to get along, we can work this out, or even if it's we can come to an agreement. When you're in the middle of a divorce, all of a sudden they become your best friend. All of a sudden things are happening that are completely confusing you. And they do that again to manipulate you, because they want to get you away from your lawyer, or they want to get you away from your therapist, or they want to get you away from whoever it is that they think now has some other form of control over you. And why do they do that? First, yes, of course, they want you to do what they want you to do. But it all comes back to narcissistic supply, which is the holy grail for narcissists. Everything they do is driven by that narcissistic supply. It's like the rat in the maze that's going for that cheese. That's exactly what they're going for all the time. And one of the things I say about narcissists is, even though they are absolutely the most horrible people to deal with on the planet, they are actually very simple to understand. And once you get them, once you figure out that everything that they're doing is to keep as much narcissistic supply as they can possibly get, and you're just part of that scheme and you're part of that manipulation, and if you are in their zone of world and you even could possibly continue to be a source of supply, they're going to keep you around. So when you're going to negotiate with the narcissist, that's one of the things that you need to remember the most, is that everything that they do is driven by narcissistic supply. So this is by no means a comprehensive list of all of the things that they do to manipulate and punish their victims. I mean, certainly in a divorce setting, they do all kinds of things like weaponize the court system, use children as pawns, ignore court orders, ignore requests to produce, not produce financial documents, on and on and on. Intimidation, threats of violence, lying, stalking, all kinds of things I've seen in the divorce cases, which they do even in dissolution of business settings or dissolution of business partner settings. They act the same way that they do in regular life, only on steroids and 1,000 times worse.
Now, if you're dealing with that pesky narcissist who's probably quite the pain in the neck in your life, then here's what you need to be looking for, because anybody who either has narcissistic personality disorder or just narcissistic traits or tendencies,
they tend to employ the same types of tricks to try to manipulate people into controlling them. It really doesn't matter if they are a covert narcissist or an overt narcissist, they still use the same kinds of tricks. So here are the things that you should be looking for. So number one is shaming and belittling. This is a very, very classic narcissistic trait, because remember that narcissists inside are actually the most insecure. They have absolutely no self-esteem, so they look for it all externally. And so they're looking for people to, of course, make them look good and tell them how wonderful they are. But in that process, they also need to try to make everybody else look worse, because they feel like that that's the only way that they're going to end up looking better. So they shame you, they belittle you, they do it both in public and in private. And sometimes they'll do it under the guise of, oh, I'm only joking, or can't you take a joke, or I'm just trying to help you. They use these hurtful words, and you rely on the fact that maybe one day you will be good enough. But trust me, you are already good enough. Number two thing that they do is try to gather a team. They gather a team against you. It's also called triangulation. And here is where they're going to try to go to the people that they especially think that you think a lot of, or that you might go to for your own advice or help. And they immediately try to get that person on their side. So they try to make themselves look good. They try to make you look bad. They try to gather this whole army of people to make it seem like the whole world is against you. And therefore, if you go against this narcissist, then you're really torpedoing yourself, because all these people are going to think badly of you too, because all these people love this particular person. So triangulation, or trying to gather people against you, is a very typical thing that narcissists do. So the third thing that narcissists do is they try to minimize or undervalue you. And this can often be very, very confusing, because what narcissists typically do is they start off telling you how amazing you are, how wonderful you are, how beautiful you are, how smart you are, how gorgeous you are, how handsome you are, whatever. And so you're sucked in to this, feeling that this person thinks that you're the most amazing thing that ever walked the earth. And so what happens is you're constantly trying to find that place again. Like, how did I have that? How can I get back to that? Because what happens is the relationship starts to erode, and they start to belittle you. They start to say, it looks like you're putting on weight, or maybe you're not that smart, or, they just start to undervalue you. So like, let's say you've done a lot for that person, and they'll minimize your contributions or the things that you've done, that make it seem like it's not that big of a deal, or they could have done it themselves, something like that. So it just never feels like you can catch back up to whoever that person was that loved you or thought you were amazing back in the beginning. Are you recognizing these traits so far? If you are, give me an amen in the comments. Okay, so the fourth thing that they do is they try to play the victim. And this can also feel confusing, because they start off seeming like so strong and that they can really take care of themselves, but then they'll start to say things to make it seem like you're doing something to them. Like, see, I can never get through to you. You never understand me, things like that. And this is especially something that covert narcissists do. And I have a whole video on covert narcissism in relationships, and I will post a link to that below. You're definitely going to want to check that out if you think that you're dealing with a covert narcissist. But remember that playing the victim, they're always sicker than you. They always have more on them than you do. They're always put upon. And oftentimes you're the one who's doing it, or it's your fault for not doing enough or doing too much or whatever. But they are always the victim in whatever it is. Okay, the fifth thing that they do
is gaslighting. And what gaslighting is, if you don't know, I know this is one of those terms that gets thrown around quite a lot, is that they say things or do things to make you think that you were crazy. So, as I explained in my video on covert narcissism, it came from a movie, and the husband was blowing out these gas lights, and the wife would say, oh, wasn't that just that lamp just lit? And he would say, no, it wasn't. And so he was trying to make her crazy. So that's where the term comes from. And so what narcissists will do is they'll say things to you like, oh, we discussed that and you agreed. Or we had that conversation. I'm sorry, there must have been a misunderstanding on your part. And you know that there was never a misunderstanding, or you didn't have that conversation. But sometimes when people are saying that to you over and over again so many times, you really do start to question your own sanity, which is exactly what they want you to do, because the narcissist wants you to be fully reliant on that person for your self-worth, for your self-esteem, for everything, so that they have total control over you. Okay, the sixth thing that they do is controlling behavior. So, if you're in a relationship with this person, they usually want to be the one to pay the bills, or they want to control all of the aspects of everything, how things look in your home, how the bookshelves are organized, just really everything. They might want to control what you wear, something like that, or who you're seeing, everything about you. And the reason why they do that is going back to the gaslighting conversation, and that is that they want total control over you and over everything that you're doing, so that you are completely reliant on them for all of your needs and all of your self-esteem, which of course they're going to strip from you. And so you end up feeling like you're losing yourself in these relationships. And the last thing they do, and remember, this is just a menu of the main things they do. There may be others, but these are the main things that narcissists do to try to manipulate people. The last thing, number 7, is the project and deflect. So in other words, basically, they're going to blame you for all of their own behavior, because they have to remain flawless, and they're never wrong. So, if you ended up going the wrong way in the car, then it's definitely your fault. If too much money was spent that month, then that was your fault too. Or if you're working with this person and a project didn't get done on time, then that was your fault. Even if it was their fault because they didn't give it to you on time or whatever, they'll never see that. Narcissists generally don't apologize, and they never take responsibility for their actions. So they're going to project it onto you, so that you can be the one that's the target, and you're the problem, and you're the one that's triggering their anger. And it's honestly, it's like a black hole that you will never fill, because you're always going to be the problem, and they're always going to have problems. So you're constantly trying to catch up to fix things that are never going to be fixed. There's never going to be an end to what needs to be fixed, or in you or for them. So if you are dealing with a narcissist, first of all, I'm sorry. I've been there too. It totally sucks. And the thing that I really need to tell you, and I've dealt with them in my own personal life, in business and in other areas, and also as an attorney, I've represented them. I've had them on the other side. So I understand this personality very, very well. And the thing that I have to tell you is you have to take appropriate measures to try to get them out of your life, because it's going to start affecting your health, not only your mental health, but your physical health as well. I mean, it's so difficult to get over having this person in your life. It's almost like having PTSD. So, I mean, your cortisol levels go up, you get ulcers, heart attacks, all kinds of things can happen to you. So you've got to start figuring out a way to get this person out of your life. So, whether it's going to be physical barriers, whether it's a divorce, whether it's, find a different job, or whatever it is that you need to do. But I would try to work this person out of your life, whether it's distant, maybe you limit the communication in a certain way. Maybe you create barriers that you need to in order to protect yourself.
but do what you need to do to protect yourself from this person.
Summer's right around the corner and I'm already planning my next getaway. I love using points for travel and I'm always looking for ways to earn more. Here's a life hack I wish I'd known sooner. When you pay your rent through Bilt, you earn flexible, transferable points and unlock exclusive benefits along the way. Let me explain. There's no cost to join, and when you pay your rent through Bilt, you unlock flexible points that can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. When you pay your rent through Bilt, you unlock two powerful benefits. First, you earn one of the industry's most valuable points on rent every month, no matter where you live or who your landlord is. Your rent now works for you. Second, you gain access to exclusive neighborhood benefits in your city. Bilt's neighborhood benefits are things like extra points on dining out, complimentary post-workout shakes, free mats or towels at your favorite fitness studios, and unique benefits or experiences that only Bilt members can access. And when you're ready to travel, Bilt points can be converted to your favorite miles and hotel points around the world, meaning that your rent can literally take you places. So if you're not earning points on Bilt rent, my question is, what are you waiting for? Start paying your rent through Bilt and take advantage of your neighborhood benefits by going to joinbilt.com/negotiate. That's joinbilt.com/negotiate. Make sure to use our URL so they know that we sent you. That's joinbilt/negotiate to sign up to joinbilt.com/negotiate today.
All right, so let's talk about the covert narcissist. First of all, coverts are the worst. I think covert narcissists are the worst ones because honestly, they're the most difficult to spot. They seem so nice, and I had a covert narcissist business partner, and these are the ones that everybody else thinks they're so wonderful. And, to the rest of the world, they seem absolutely perfect. And really to you at the beginning, they do too. And the way they come across is almost like a victim sometimes too. The grandiose narcissists are much easier to spot because they take over the room and they tell everybody how great they are. And they have these big movements and, they're almost holding court. But the covert narcissists are much more humble a lot of times. The kinds of tactics that they use are much more passive aggressive. They're much more kind of death by 1,000 cuts. They'll tell you right to their face that they're going to do something wonderful, and then they just don't do it. They'll couch things in terms of care. They'll go to flying monkeys, their third parties, and they'll be like, I am so concerned for so-and-so because of, how much they're drinking. And so they'll couch things like that. And, you're doing so well with your weight loss. I mean, it's too bad that it left those stretch marks. It's terrible. That kind of thing. There's so much more under the radar. I think so much more insidious than a grandiose narcissist in a lot of ways, because the pain and suffering that they cause is so much harder to articulate, to spot, to get other people to see, to get other people on board, to understand. So the word salad that they use, it's this tactic that they use to get their targets to be confused, to be destabilized, to get control over them, to get them to think that their reality is not their reality. They will have done something and you literally just caught them red-handed, and you're looking at them having done that, and they'll say, I didn't do that. I would never do that. You obviously are having inappropriate relationship with this person. That's not true. I would never do that. And you obviously did. No, I would never, and it's so obvious that they did, but they would just lie right to your face. No, I would never do that. And it's like obvious gaslighting, but then they'll say things directly to you
Like, what you're saying absolutely makes no sense, or you misunderstood me, and you know that you didn't misunderstand them. It's a constant gaslighting, where they'll take parts of things that you said and say, oh, we talked about that and you agreed. Well, you didn't agree to that. You agreed to something similar to that, but not that. But then they'll twist it and turn it into something that's similar. They turn it into something else. And this is what they do constantly. Or I've done nothing wrong, or you're so insecure. I'm the only one that can stand you, or I always defend you. I always have your back. I always support you. Clearly, they haven't been supporting you. That sort of thing. I didn't hurt you. You hurt yourself. That sort of thing. You're crazy. Why are you so defensive all the time? And you're so left with feeling like so confused constantly. And you have this pit in your stomach and you're feeling, like you have this thing in your chest, and it literally starts to affect you physically, because you know that that's not reality. You know that that's not what's happening, but yet they will do this thing to you, and yet you don't know how to fight back, because it's just constant. It's constant. It's constant. I have a whole video called Covert Narcissism in Relationships. I highly recommend that you check that out. And it's exhausting. You end up exhausted in these relationships, because you can't just have a regular conversation with them, because you're just twisted all the time. It's just everything you say is just constantly twisted. So you'll say something and they'll say, oh, you raised your voice. And I didn't raise my voice. Well, you did. You raised your voice. Well, I didn't say that. No, you did say that. No, I didn't, and you're constantly back and forth with that, and you're exhausted all the time, just constantly exhausted. And I do have a video called Word Salad, Narcissism 101. Definitely, you can check that out as well. I want to just briefly talk about your 5 Ds, because I think that these are so good.
Yeah. Yep. So it's the 5 Ds in a relationship. But it's not, these 5 Ds can apply to any relationship.
Yeah.
It can apply to a work relationship.
Yeah.
And the first one is distort.
So these are the 5 Ds that are negative forces in a relationship.
Yep. So distort. That D, what does it do? It tells lies. It plants negative thoughts in you, right? It makes you think negative things. So the thing that I always say, and so let's apply it to your relationship. You could think, oh, he doesn't love me anymore. He doesn't think I'm pretty. Well, that's distortion, right? Those are lies. It's the lies that you're just listening to negative lies. And so speak truth to the lies. Right? The minute you start hearing those kind of things coming in, speak truth. Just, I literally, the minute I do that, sometimes I even verbally go, stop. And I'll say something positive to myself, or I'll think a positive thought. Does that make sense? So you've got to,
we are meaning making machines, right?
Yeah.
We make things mean things that don't mean that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's a big one. So distortion in a relationship, in any relationship, is not good. And the next one is discourage. Okay. So your distortions can turn into discouragement. Oh, I'm not good enough for him. So you start to play this thing in your mind. I'm not worthy. So no. Then you need to turn it around, encourage yourself, again, encourage your partner. So it may be that it's your partner. Like I said, he wanted to come in. I wanted to cut him down and discourage him, but instead I encouraged him. So you've got to turn that one around. So first D is distort, second D is discourage, and the third one is doubt, right? So lies and discouragement lead to doubt yourself, to doubt God's plan for you, you know, to doubt your direction, to doubt the love that your partner might have for you. So the way to counter doubt is through trust. So when John had shared with me that he, had done this infidelity, at that point, I can continue to doubt. The minute he was going out, I could have doubted him. But for me, I knew that I had to trust. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying trust without something to back it up. They need to give you something to trust, right? But just make sure it's not things you're kind of just, coming up with in your own head. And the fourth D is distract. And this is such a big one because think about it. If you are busy or your partner's busy, say you're busy doing all the things that you need to do to take care of your household or take care of the kids or make money, and you're feeling, kind of unappreciated. And all of a sudden, somebody kind of comes into your life that tells you how wonderful you are, how, it's a distraction. Or, a lot of times for men, and women, it can be pornography. It can be pornography, something that distracts you and just seems shiny and bright, and distraction from your relationship. You need to be careful of that because, that there's that whole saying, if the devil doesn't make you busy, and you're right. If the devil doesn't make you bad, he'll make you busy. So it's a distraction. Mm-hmm. And then the fifth one is divide. And that divide, if it's in a relationship or in a marriage, I should say, the divide means divorce. And so you have to guard yourself against those 5 Ds. And so it's about counteracting each one of them. And the divide, again, if you two are connected as a couple, you can really negate a lot of that. It's when you're not united. Again, it's when you're doing the I and not the we. So those are the 5 Ds.
Right. And again, we stress, obviously, if you are in an abusive relationship, if you are in a situation where your partner is a narcissist.
Right.
And not willing to change and being verbally or emotionally abusive to you, then clearly and not willing to be a we.
Right. And in that case, then you need to walk away from the relationship. And I'm not one to say, leave the relationship, but there are deal breakers. And exactly what you just named, those are deal breakers. If they're not willing to change, if they're not willing to look at themselves, if they're not willing to be honest, right? That's huge. Here's an example. And it can be, you come up with your own guidelines, but say your partner has cheated on you or has shown that they've been distracted. Maybe for building trust, you can look at their phone. Now, some people might think that's a violation, but you know what? If that's something that you two negotiate and say, you know what, it just would make me feel better until I can trust you. One of the things that John did do, I got to tell you, I persecuted him, and rightly so. I mean, I was so hurt and I felt very, very deceived, right? So when John really, he was working towards being in the relationship and being a good partner, I was allowed to look at his phone whenever I wanted to, and I, hand it over. And now some people might feel like, oh, well, that's that in itself. For me, it was very important. it was very important for me to look and see what was going on because I needed to build that trust. So, your partner has to be willing to do, and, you have to negotiate those together.
Yeah.
Depending on what they are.
And so what does that mean for you? And one of the things that I like is that you have this list of things like what is, a perfect partner for you. And I think that that's an important thing for people. Okay, if they're not going to stay in this relationship, what does that look like going forward? And in some ways it's sort of a manifestation exercise.
Yeah. I always say I did my best relationship work when I was not in a relationship. So, I dated some real winners before I met John. And wow, I dated an incredible narcissist. He was a piece of work, but he brought me to my knees. There was a lot of pain and a lot of crying, but I was able to work on myself a lot. And I think that's why when John started exhibiting these behaviors, I didn't cave and I didn't fold and I didn't go down, because I saw it for what it was. And I had done enough work on myself where I'm like, hey, that's not okay. This behavior is not okay. And I'm having to teach my daughter that, she actually got into a relationship with a narcissist. And I watched as he started to look better and do better. The more she kept feeding into him, this guy ended up it was amazing to see the transformation in him. And it was sickening to see the transformation in my daughter. She absolutely did not look like herself. She didn't act like herself. It was a really sad thing. It was almost like he sucked the lifeblood out of her, So
oh, yeah, I saw it in my daughter as well.
Yeah. So you have to be careful of that. So you should always be working on yourself. And yeah, listen, make a list of what's important to you in a relationship and pay attention. Some of this is really basic, right? But we forget because we get so taken back by maybe the good looks or the charisma, it's the same thing that I tell my kids, when they were going to school. I used to say, if you are in a group of people or you're with somebody and you walk away and you don't feel good, they're not your people. They're not your people. So you always have to pay attention to that. Yeah. So it's very important to do the work on yourself when you're not in a relationship.
Yeah. One of my favorite things to say is stop trying to make not your people, your people.
Right.
Yeah. And so you have the 4 C's, which I love for, if you don't have it in your current relationship, then I think it's totally a deal breaker. And, this is something that you definitely want in your next relationship. So talk about that. And I think that that's like a good way for us to wrap up.
Okay. So the first of the 4 C's is communicate. I've said it a couple times in this interview. I'm going to say it again. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Where there's a void in negativity, where there's a void in communication, negativity will fill it. So I always like to encourage couples to find a time that works for you. So I knew with my husband, right when he was walking in the door, was not a good time to try to communicate with him. So find your sweet spot. And I've had to find that with my kids. What's the best time to talk to them where they really open up to me? So communicate. One of the things you can do as a couple, ask your spouse or ask your partner on a scale of 1 to 10, how do I communicate? And what would make it a 10? Right? That's an easy one. So the next C is connect. And you have to communicate to connect. And again, that sounds like an obvious one, but think about it. When you get really busy with work and with kids and, maybe starting a new business, whatever it is, you don't take as much time to connect. So try to find a time that works for you all to connect. Now, one of the things that I did with my husband is we would take a walk. And I got to tell you, sometimes these walks, we would fight. We would fight. But by the end of the walk, we ended up working out a lot. So sometimes it's just about that movement and the talking that we were able to talk a lot. And one of the things that I highly recommend that people do with their family is a family meeting. Once a week, we would get together with our children and sit around the table. And I'm going to tell you something, it was not easy. There were times we'd go family, or John would say family meeting, or maybe I would start it depending. And, the eyes would roll and everybody had to put their phones down. But Rebecca, I'm going to tell you something. It was fascinating to me. John or I would bring something to the table to read. A lot of times it might be maybe scripture or an article that somebody had written. And it never failed that something one of us was going through, we wouldn't know the kids were experiencing. This article would just open up the channels for us to have a conversation. And it made our family dynamic and our connection with each other so strong. We became such a stronger family. The only regret that I have about family meetings is I didn't start soon enough. So even if it's just you and your spouse or your mate, do it. So that's communicate, connect, and the next one is commit. Commit to your relationship. Commit to work on it. Commit to, and it could be little things. So, there's been a study that the strongest relationships are when each of the partners take time to listen to their spouse or help them with something. And I'm talking little things. So John might be writing an article and he might call me into his office and say, hey, can you just read this real quick? And I'm going to tell you something. Last thing I want to do is sit down at that moment and read through his article. But I know it's important to him. And so I'll take that 5 minutes to sit and read the article and give my input. So it's committing to the relationship. It might mean going to a company party with your spouse when you really have no desire to hang out with the work, the work people. So commit to your relationship. And then the last one is care. Show you care. Isn't it funny how a lot of times in relationship, our spouse is like the last one we give the love to. And we kind of talked about that in the 5 Ds too, but showing that you care about them, that you care about the relationship. So, and that's the whole it's we, not me. So Those are the 4 C's: communicate, connect, commit, and care. And those apply to not just intimate relationships. Again, can apply to work relationships, any of that.
Friendships.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're diving deep into how to avoid marrying a narcissist. As someone who has seen lots and lots of people come through not just my high conflict negotiation certification programs, my SLAY programs, I've seen a lot of people who have dealt with this, and I've seen firsthand the havoc narcissistic relationships can wreak. So I want to make sure that you guys have all the tools that you need to protect yourself in avoiding that narcissistic person. So make sure that you also get my Disarm the Narc phrases for expert strategies on disarming narcissists at disarmthenarc.com. Trust me, it's a game changer. So let's start by identifying the warning signs that could indicate the narcissistic tendencies in a potential partner. One of the most glaring red flags is the lack of empathy. Narcissists struggle to empathize with others, often prioritizing their own needs above everyone else. For example, let's say you're sick, you're like really feeling bad. This can happen very early on in the relationship. You're with somebody and they just can't muster any empathy for you. I've seen situations where the relationship went on pretty well until the person got sick. And then that's when the other person's true colors showed up. Like, I was actually talking to somebody recently whose spouse, when they got cancer, their spouse actually never even came with them to their chemo, never even showed up, actually was like talking about what a burden it was. All kinds of like horrible things were said to them when they got sick with chemo. Talk about a lack of empathy. I mean, it was pretty shocking. So if you know that you're with somebody who just literally has no empathy whatsoever, that's a huge red flag. If you're with that kind of a person before you marry them, that is something that you definitely want to get out of before you marry that person. If somebody's dismissing your feelings early on, let's say you're telling them about something that's going on at work, and they're like, oh, that doesn't sound that bad or whatever, or they're unable to grasp the depths of your emotions, they're disregarding your emotional well-being, that's not a good sign. The next sign is excessive admiration or grandiosity. Confidence is great. You want somebody who has confidence. You want somebody who has a lot of self-worth too. But an inflated ego, a constant need for validation, telltale signs of narcissism. Let's say you're the person that you're with constantly boasting about their achievement, constantly seeking validation and admiration at every turn. It's like, I'm so great at this. I'm so great at that. Oh, don't you think I'm good? Don't you think I did a great job? Don't you think I look good? How do I look in these pants? How do I look in this outfit? And then constantly getting you to like tell them how wonderful they were. And where it just becomes like draining and suffocating, where you just feel like it's overshadowing any genuine connection, any genuine intimacy in the relationship. It's all about them all the time. Then you know that it's just too much. That's another telltale sign. And by the way, if you guys have seen this, put I've seen it in the comments below. Another one is if your partner is using manipulation tactics to control your every move, from guilt tripping you to gaslighting you. And their relentless pursuit of power leaves you feeling trapped and powerless, like questioning your own reality. So they're constantly gaslighting you or constantly guilt tripping you. So let's just say they're saying things all the time like, oh, we talked about that and you agreed to that, don't you remember? And you know that you didn't have that conversation and you're starting to question your reality about things and making you feel bad about things that you shouldn't be feeling bad about. And you're just feeling kind of icky about things all of a sudden. Like, those are huge warning signs that you know that you probably shouldn't have. Oh, I don't remember agreeing to that, or I shouldn't have said that. They're making you feel bad about things that you're doing with your friends or not doing, or making you feel bad about the things that they're doing, and that there's boundaries that are being crossed or shouldn't be crossed, or disrespect happening. You're feeling like your well-being is being stripped in that situation. Because remember that narcissists often disregard boundaries and they view them as obstacles to their control. And so when you're starting to feel that happening, your heart starts not feeling good, your chest is not feeling good, you're feeling it in the pit of your stomach, you know that that's not a good sign. Don't hesitate to enforce those boundaries. Don't hesitate to enforce consequences if that's something that's going on with you. Now, let's talk about self-care, because in the middle of all of this chaos, in the middle of all this craziness, it starts to feel like that frog with the slow boil, right? It's easy to lose sight of your own priorities and your own needs. And they're going to start making you feel selfish. They're going to start to guilt trip you. They're going to start to make you feel like you're the one who's being manipulative, especially if you've got your own self-worth issues, especially if you've got your own needs and your own kind of wounds that you haven't healed, where you feel like, you know what, I'm being bad and all that sort of thing. And it's essential for your own mental health and your own emotional well-being to start putting boundaries in place and making a self-care list And making that part of your daily routine is going to be essential. All right, whether it's meditation, whether it's journaling, spending time with loved ones, finding activities that nourish your soul, replenish your spirit. Really, really important. This is going to be your lifeline in turbulent times. Really, really important. So I want you to put a list in the chat right now, in the comments below right now, of the things that you are going to do to take care of yourself right now.